Good Monday morning on week number 4. Welcome back, British Lit students. I hope you had a good weekend, and I hope that you're ready for another week of British literature. So, before we get started on this week's readings, I want to go ahead and comment on the postings from the past. First of all, there have not been nearly enough of them turned in. Do bear in mind that if your week postings are more than 3 weeks late, I won't even bother to read it. I'll just stick an F on it and be done. So you don't want to fall behind in this class. You want to stay caught up on the readings, unless you have made some other arrangements with me. That does happen from time to time. That emergencies happen, and you need to make arrangements. And I'm willing to be flexible on that, but I'm not willing to be flexible on, oh gosh, I just didn't do it. So do bear in mind that if you're behind, and you need to get caught up. Now, several of you tried to cite the poems by Wordsworth and Coleridge in the most recent postings. And I want to say I'm pleased that you tried that. And I'm happy. And, this is how we learn, is by trying these things out and then learning from our mistakes and trying to correct them. There was a big mistake that I saw in several of your postings, and I'm not real sure where this came from. The fact that several of you made this same mistake tells me that several of you might be accessing the poems in a source other than buying the actual paper textbook. So what I have seen is that when you cite these poems by Wordsworth and Coleridge, you are actually citing not by Wordsworth and Coleridge as the authors, but where the author's name should go, you're putting in the names of a couple of editors. And here's what's really confusing about this for me. You're not even using the main editor. Stephen Greenblatt is a god in literary studies. So that's one of the reasons why I was pleased for this 9th edition, is because Stephen Greenblatt is lead editor. But those of you that are citing by editor instead of by poet, you're not even citing his name. You are going way down the list of editors. And you are using, and I'm looking at the editor's list here on the front matter of our textbook, you are using the final name on the list, Jack Stillinger, and somebody in the middle named Deirdre Shauna Lynch. And there might be some variations on this, but the fact of the matter is, you are giving Jack Stillinger and Deirdre Shauna Lynch credit for writing poems that were actually written by William Wordsworth and written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So, you need to cite these things properly. We have an MLA page in the D2L. We have an MLA folder, as a matter of fact. I have links to the Purdue Owl. You also have the My Blank English book. I am glad that you're trying to cite these poems correctly. I'm glad that you're making the effort. So please don't get me wrong there. But I don't know why about 8 or 10 of you cited by editors, and it just baffles me because I don't know where these have come from. But whatever source you're using, do be aware that it's incorrect. So make sure you use the correct source. And the correct source is to cite by the author, then the title, then the anthology, then the editor. And the only editor you really need to cite is Stephen Greenblatt. You could cite a couple more, or you could just say et al. In fact, I would, if you want to give credit to all the editors, say ed by Stephen Greenblatt et al. And that will tell me that there are a bunch of editors. And that would be fine. So try to work on that. That's something that in fact, I'm glad you're making these mistakes on these postings rather than making the mistakes on the research paper that you're going to be writing later this semester. I'd much rather you make the mistakes in the postings and lose a point on some tiny little posting than to make big mistakes on the research paper and then end up losing a lot of points, because the research paper is worth more than these postings are. Okay, so that is all I have to say about the postings. Let's take a look at this week's readings. We're going to see Mary Wollstonecraft again. One of your readings is Vindication of the Rights of Woman. In this treatise, Mary Wollstonecraft, and of course this is a smaller part of a much larger book, Mary Wollstonecraft is going to make some arguments, and one of the most important is that women should be allowed the same education as men. Back when Wollstonecraft wrote this, women were just supposed to be cute, and they were supposed to be marriageable, and they were supposed to have something called talents, which were basically, they could play a little piano, but they couldn't be Mozart. They could sing a little, but they couldn't be, Beyonce. They could do a little bit of everything. They could write a little bit, but they weren't allowed to be William Wordsworth. They could do a little bit of everything, but they were not allowed to be experts in anything, and they weren't allowed the same educations. Women back then were supposed to be stupid, and that was what was supposed to make for a good wife. Mary Wollstonecraft is going to turn that paradigm on its head in her writing of Vindication of the Rights of Woman. And notice that's woman singular, not women plural, but Vindication of the Rights of Woman. And she's going to say, hey, no, that's not exactly right. If you want a good wife, you want one that's educated, you want one that's smart, because if a man has a stupid wife, he will get bored with her, and then he'll go commit adultery with another woman. But if the woman can stimulate him mentally as well as physically, then he will be much happier with his wife, and he will not be unfaithful. In fact, he will stay faithful to her forever. So that's an interesting argument that Mary Wollstonecraft is going to make in Vindication of the Rights of Woman. Then you're going to have William Blake. William Blake actually is pre-William Wordsworth and pre-Samuel Taylor Coleridge. William Blake is right there on the cusp of the Age of Enlightenment and Romanticism. So I went ahead and backtracked to him because he's very important for a few reasons. Notice that I've got the poems off in pairs. I paired The Lamb with the Tiger, I paired Infant Joy with Infant Sorrow, and then there are two different versions of Chimney Sweep. Now all three of these, or all six of these poems, or all three of these pairings, if you will, are very, very short. But I want you to pay attention to Songs of Innocence, which is a happy version of these poems, and Songs of Experience, which is a little bit more, well, not as happy. I don't want to say they're angry or sad, but maybe disillusioned with the happiness that is found in the Songs of Innocence. So bear in mind that when William Blake wrote these poems, he actually was an artist. So he drew paintings, and then he put the poems inside the paintings. And you can still, by Googling on the internet, find versions. In fact, I think there's actually some of them in our textbook where you can find versions of these poems the way that they would appear to the readers, and not so much to just a writing in a textbook. So William Blake, very interesting person. He thought that he had a direct connection with God and that he had a window to heaven that most humans don't have, and he tried to put that into his poetry. And I think that it's interesting to see how he plays both sides of the coin and how he actually explores both sides of every topic. So that one, of course, all of these poems, as you can see, are written from the point of view of children. In fact, he actually wrote these poems for children. So bear that in mind as you read this. And then John Keats. When you start reading John Keats, you're getting towards the end of the Romantic period. John Keats tragically died at the age of 25. But this man actually accomplished more in his 25 years, especially in the field of poetry, than many people accomplish in an entire 60 or 70 year lifetime. He was that good. He was that proficient a writer. So notice that all three of the, or two of the poems I've got you doing are odes, and one of them is a sonnet. So the sonnet and the ode are the two main poetic forms which John Keats wrote in. Look at the slideshow on him. In fact, look at the slideshow on all three of these authors, because these slideshows can help you as you read these poems. And of course, in the case of Mary Wollstonecraft, it's not a poem; it's an essay. But all these can help you, and they can help you with your discussion postings as well. Remember to format your poetry correctly. That's where a lot of you are getting points counted off. Is that you're not putting the line slashes in the short quotes, or if it's more than 4 lines, you're not putting it in long quote form. Also, bear in mind, I noticed that I said that in the works cited entry you need to cite by author, not by editor. Also, bear in mind that when you're citing poetry, you cite by line number and not by page number. So to clarify, for Mary Wollstonecraft, you're going to cite by page number because that's a prose essay. For both Blake and Keats, and remember, you got to post on all three authors. For Blake and Keats, you need to cite by the line numbers of the poems that you're citing. So I hope that the slideshows and Such will help you, and the questions. Remember, I would actually read the discussion questions before actually reading the actual works, so you'll know what to look for as you're reading. Take notes, take good notes, put them in the margins of your book, write them on separate sheet of notebook paper. I prefer index cards because index cards I can just rearrange as I need to. But whatever it is you feel the need to do all of that so that you get really good scores on these postings. You remember to use direct quotes in the postings as well, because direct quotes are always much more reliable than just your summary. Okay, that's all I got. So if you have questions, then by all means feel free to send me an email. If it's too complicated a question to answer in an email, I may ask you to call me on my phone during office hours, or to visit my office during office hours if you happen to be in Albany and come on campus. I love meeting students in my office, especially online students. It's always nice to be able to put a face with a name. In fact, I've actually met a couple of you already, and then there are a couple of you that have taken my classes before. But for the majority of you, I only know you by a name, and it would be nice to actually get to know you as a person a little bit as well. So that's all I got. Happy reading. I do think you'll enjoy all three of our authors this week, and if you have any questions, let me know.